Hello everyone, this is Gene and I'm back with another video. So first of all, thank you to everyone so much. We just got over 200 subscribers, right? I understand that in the grand scheme of YouTube, that's like a drop in the bucket, but you know, I didn't have 200 last year, and it's because of you guys, and it's because you all enjoy my content that I even have an audience of 200 to speak to on a regular basis. So thank you all so very much. Like sports and like comic books, it's a team effort. No one does it alone. So thank you all again so much. So I wanted to do this video, one, because I want to do something somewhat positive. There's so much negative in the world, and when you're a critic channel like I am, or I guess you could say a commentary channel, you tend to voice your critical opinion on stuff, but not necessarily your positive ones, and I'm just as guilty of that. In fact, I said earlier this year that I was going to try to balance out the positive and negative content, and I haven't done that yet, so bad, Gene, bad, slap on the wrist. I will be getting to more positive content in time. I actually have a list of like video projects that I want to work on, and it's going to be stuff like Rising of the Shield Hero and positive, good comics. So it's coming. It's coming. But today I wanted to honor a request that I had received, I believe, from Joel or Joel. Please let me know how you say it. Excuse me. Joel Prince. He had made a request on my What If I Made Kamala Khan video, asking for a video about what I would do if I was writing Jubilee. So this is my response. I typically or rather I should say that I typically like to do a request when I first get them so they don't get lost in the shuffle. But with this one I had to take some time because I want to do some research, because Jubilee has always been like a sidekick character. So I wanted to go over her history, sort of figure out, where she's been, where she's at, and let my mind sort of run. And the thing is, I kept coming into the same idea, and I wasn't sure whether it was writer's block or a creative block, or if this is just what I feel is the best way to approach it. So after a week, I've just decided to go with what I have because I really can't think of anything else. So here's what I would do with Jubilee, at least as she currently is. I would retire the character. I would do this because if you look at her history, if you look at the history of her story, she's been a failure to launch. That's been a sort of theme with her stories. I don't know if that was intentional by the writers over the years. I doubt it, given how many different writers have worked on the character and worked on the X-Men over the years. But she's been a failure to launch. And she's had this habit and this history of trying to leave the X-Men, doing her own thing, leading like the Young Mutant teams like X-Factor or Generation X and teams like that. But ultimately always coming back to the X-Men, in particular to Wolverine, who's her like surrogate father figure, and just never actually really breaking out on her own. She didn't really have that coming of age and growing into an adult that Kitty Pryde did. So I think if I wrote the character, at least moving forward, I wouldn't really alter too much of her history. It's like 30 some years. I think the character was originally introduced in like 1989, so it's like 30 years at this point, or 31 years. And I'm not going to go and try to retcon 30 years of history. I'm not Brian Michael Bendis. But moving forward, I would retire her. I would have her give up being a superhero for the next adventure, which would be leading a normal life. Because one of the things about the X-Men is that they're supposed to represent the best in mutant kind, but also they're trying, at least the idea is that they're trying to show both mutants and the humans who are scared of them, that mutants can live in the regular world just like humans can, just like regular people can. They just happen to have supernatural powers, right? But we don't really see anybody who's a well-known member of the X-Men living a normal life. Now, some may say, well, the X-Men work at the Xavier Institute and they function as teachers, and that's true and all well and good, but that's more of a cover for their actual activities than it really is their job or their passion, right? That's not their life. It's the cover story that they come up with, so they look legitimate, right? So that's a bit different. So before I retire Jubilee, let me give a brief synopsis of the character, especially for those who may not be familiar with her. So Jubilee's real name is Jubilation Lee. She was born in Beverly Hills, California, to rich Asian parents. She was living a idyllic life for an 80s child, right? Living in Beverly Hills. Up until one day, her parents are murdered in a case of mistaken identity. She goes to an orphanage for a brief time, but she runs away from the orphanage, and she ends up homeless, living in a mall, and doing sort of like parlor tricks because her powers are to create sparkles or fireworks. It's somewhat similar to Dazzler, actually. So she spends some time homeless, hiding from people, pickpocketing people. What happens is that I believe a sentinel attacks the mall. She runs into a few of the X-women. She follows them. Her first adventure ensues, and then she's taken in by the X-Men. If you've ever seen the first 2 episodes of the X-Men animated series, I think it's called Night of the Sentinels, that pretty much sums up her origin story well enough, while of course not bringing in the fact that her parents were killed, because it's a kids TV show. Though they do it for Batman, but still, Jubilee's not the main character. But anyway, so her stories after that have pretty much been the same thing. She goes on adventures with the X-Men. She had your obligatory find the killers of my parents and, have the moral struggle between justice and revenge. In fact, she had this type of storyline twice in her character history. Once, I believe, in the 90s with Wolverine, and then again when she found the person who hired the thugs that ended up killing her parents. But she's had your pretty standard superhero stories as the writers have tried to make her grow up and older over the years. They've done things like give her a new, edgy, sexy look to sort of, show that she's growing up and into her own, becoming a woman. Sorry. This was not well received by fans. Then there's the fact that she's been the head of teams such as Generation X and X Factor and similar teams. And there was that one time or rather I should say, she was one of the many mutants who lost their powers during the House of M event when Scarlet Witch, who was insane, pretty much changed reality and depowered about 98% of the mutant population. It was in that she became Wandra, and she basically used like a tech suit to still go on adventures. There was a time where she got turned into a vampire. That was just weird and not well received. She currently has a child that she adopted named Shogo, I think it is, a little boy. Right, and that's pretty much been her story. They've tried over the years to find different ways to make her interesting, but it's just been a failure to launch. So my sort of swan song story for Jubilee would be really focused on that fact. The fact that she's been a failure to launch, right? She really hasn't been able to establish a life outside of the X-Men, in particular outside of her relationship with Wolverine, the way, say, Kitty Pryde has, right? Kitty grew up, she had romances, she was almost going to marry Colossus, and then the Summer of Love of 2018 happened where she swerved him at the altar. But that's a different story for another day. But what I will say is that for anybody who argues that men don't like romance in their comic book stories, check out the videos that male comic critics did in like June and July of like 2018, because there was the Kitty Colossus wedding, and then there was the Batman Catwoman wedding. I have never seen men so irate over fictional romantic relationships in my life. Men care about romance. Maybe not as overtly as women. Maybe not in the same way as women. But men care about romance and the romantic lives of these characters just like women do. I'm just saying. Maybe not in the same way that we do, but dudes are soft-hearted. Stop acting like you're not. They like romance, just not as the focus of the story. But anyway, moving on, rant over, moving on. So, the way I would tell the story is this. I would have Jubilee be a part of Kitty's current X-Men team, and they would be going on irregular X-Men adventures. But I would have her grow increasingly dissatisfied with the fact that this is all her life seems to be. Being an adventurer, being an X-Man. She wants something different in her life. She's a mother now because she has an adopted child. She's concerned about that child's safety and about her own safety, given that she is risking her life doing these missions. And so she grows increasingly agitated with the idea of being an X-Men. Like, she still loves her teammates, but she's not exactly interested in like the field work and the adventuring anymore, right? She's simply grown tired of it, right? She's been doing it for what? I would probably say around a decade, if not a little less in her life. I mean, comic book time is weird, to be sure, but I read recently that she was 17 in 2010, and that was 10 years ago, so I would imagine now that the character is probably in her early 20s or mid-20s at this point. So basically, the way I would write this story is that Jubilee is just thinking about her life and all the years she's been in the X-Men, and while she'll always love that, she wants something else out of life. She's concerned about the environment her child's being raised in. She's concerned about her own safety. You know, she's having actual adult thoughts and considerations. And Kitty picks up on her uneasiness, but Jubilee sort of brushes her off. But what she starts doing is that she starts looking for work elsewhere. I could see Jubilee as like working with at-risk youth, given that she was homeless and she was an at-risk youth herself, and given that, you know, the X-Man that she's closest to is Wolverine, who's the quintessential bad boy. I could definitely see her working with those at-risk youth, those kids who are like on the edge, and they need a mentor to guide them. So I think she would be looking at that and just finding herself longing for a normal life. So eventually she would be discovered looking at these jobs, applying for a job, and then after this discovery, she would just finally come out and just tell the truth. That while she'll always love the X-Men and that they'll always be family to her, she doesn't want to be an X-Man anymore. She wants to go, forge her own way, live her own life. Of course, some of the X-Men would be understanding. Some would try to talk her into staying. But Wolverine, which is the X-Man whose opinion, of course, means the most to her, would not take this well. It's Wolverine. He never takes it well when a woman leaves him. It doesn't matter what type of relationship he has with them. But he would be incensed. He would tell her basically that she can't leave. She would, of course, get angry with him because who is he to tell her, a grown woman with a child of her own, what to do? So they would sort of like storm off, have a very intense argument in private, where he basically throws it in her face that every time she's ever tried to leave the X-Men, she always ends up running back home and running back to him. And she would note that that's exactly why she is doing this, because she is tired of just being the overgrown kid on the X-Men. She's tired of just being Wolverine's stand-in daughter and sidekick. That she's been Jubilee for the past, 8-10 years of her life, and she wants to know what it's like to be Jubilationly the person instead of Jubilee the X-Man. So they would have a huge argument, and there would be tension. The rest of the team would generally come to accept her decision. So what I would see happening is that there would be the X-Men would hold a celebration party for her. So what would happen is that a few days later you find out that she's gotten the job that she applied for. She's making preparations to move, and they hold a going away party for her where they reminisce and wish her well and all that, right? So this party goes on, but Jubilee notices that someone's missing. Wolverine isn't there. She searches around, she asks people if they've seen him, and one of them, probably Storm, would tell her that Wolverine went off to a bar to drink, and Jubilee would be upset by this, but she would also understand this is pretty much what Wolverine does when he's emotionally hurt. He isolates himself from the others. So there would be, of course, this celebration, but it wouldn't be the same without him, right? So she hopes and hopes against hope that he'll come back at the last minute. He doesn't. And then so she goes to his room in tears, and she writes him a letter and leaves her favorite pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses on his bed. This would actually be a throwback and a reference to a comic book story from the 1990s, which I think was around the time Wolverine lost his adamantium. This was around the time that Magneto pulled the adamantium out of his body. But he had an adventure with Jubilee. That situation with Magneto happened, and then he left the X-Men to find himself, as he typically does. And what he did was that he left a note for her and his favorite cowboy hat. So she's sort of doing the same. So that would be the nod to that story. Right, so it would be the next day. They would be at the airport. The X-Men would be there with her, talking to her, trying to encourage her. But then slowly, they would have other places to be until she's finally alone, and all she has is, her kid, her belonging, and her ambition for a new life, a normal life. So a few minutes before she has to board the plane, Wolverine would make himself known, right? He would apologize. He would explain that he's just having a hard time accepting that she's leaving because, he sees her as his little girl. And she says that she understands, but a kid's got to grow up sometime. And that, she has to be an adult and she has to be the parent and think about her own future, think about her child's future, and she asserts that she'll always be an X-Man and she'll always love him, but she just needs to go her own way. He explains that he knows and that he's coming around to accepting it. He's just having a hard time as a father or a father figure accepting that his little girl is all grown up and is leaving the roost. It would be a really hard touching moment. So then what would happen is that Logan would note that she's wearing his favorite cowboy hat, and she would say that, yeah, even I can't let certain things go. He would reveal that he got her letter and her Ray-Ban, so she would wear his hat, he would have her glasses, they would hug it out, and then he would see her off on the plane and to her new life. And of course, because he's a Wolverine, demand that she contact him as soon as she lands, or he's going to come over there and come get her. And that's pretty much how the story would end. And that's what I would do. I chose this because I couldn't think of anything else. But that was the thing. It's like I couldn't think of anywhere I could take the character or anything further you could do with her. So I was like, you know what? Maybe that's the best thing to do is to retire the character and maybe have her be like Zatanna from DC in a sense. In the sense that Jesus Christ. Zatanna is a part-time hero, right? And she's more focused and invested in her regular life as a performer, as an entertainer, than she is necessarily in being a superhero. She's always around to help if necessary, but she'd really rather just, do her show in Vegas and live normally. And I could see a similar thing for Jubilee. She'll always be a part of the X-Men. They'll always be her family, but she wants a normal life. And that if they need her help, she'll come running, but she wants to be a mom, she wants to be an adult, she wants to be a regular person as much as someone who can generate fireworks from her hands can be. And so that would be the motivation into it. Retiring the character by transitioning her into a different chapter in life. That's probably the best way I can describe it. It would be about closing or ending one chapter, right? Her chapter as an adventurer, a superhero, an X-Man, and then starting on the new chapter, which is her being a regular person. Now, the idea of her leaving, or rather me having her quit being a superhero, does sound similar to what I said with Kamala Khan, in that I would have her give up superheroing, being a superhero, I should say. The difference is the motivation behind that decision. With Kamala, it's a case of fear. It's fear, and she's not sure that she's really ready, willing, and able to make the ultimate sacrifice necessary as a hero, right? And she doesn't want to, die, and she has a life to live. So her leaving superherodom is more a case of being scared. Whereas with Jubilee, she's been through all that. She has probably spent a good decade or close to it being with the X-Men. And I would guesstimate, comic book time is weird, but I would guesstimate she's probably in her early to mid-20s by this point, if she was 17 back in 2010. So you have a character here who has been the hero, who has been in all these crazy situations, who has lived that life. And she's just wanting to put an end to all that and move on into a new adventure. It's like how people say this isn't goodbye, it's see you later. It's sort of that mentality. But it would definitely be more of a celebration, at least for everybody but Wolverine. It'd be more of a celebration and more of her sort of like emancipating herself than it would be about her acting in trepidation and fear. So anyway, that's what I would do with the character, at least at present. That's the story I would tell. the story of how her days as an X-Man come to an end. Because every story has to have an ending. So that's what I would do. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day, everybody. Or good night, wherever you are. Stay healthy, stay safe. Alright? Bye.